Chapter 25 of The Witch of Prague, A Fantastic Tale. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Witch of Prague, A Fantastic Tale by Marion Crawford. Chapter 25. After carefully locking and bolting the door of the sacristy, Sister Paul turned to Beatrice. She had set down her lamp upon the broad, polished shelf which ran all around the place, forming the top of a continuous series of cupboards, as in most sacristies, used for the vestments of the church. At the back of these high presses rose halfway to the spring of the vault. The nun seemed a little nervous, and her voice quavered oddly as she spoke. If she had tried to take up her lamp, her hand would have shaken. In the moment of danger she had been brave and determined, but now that all was over, her enfeebled strength felt the reaction from the strain. She turned to Beatrice and met her flashing black eyes. The young girl's delicate nostrils quivered, and her lips curled fiercely. "You are angry, my dear child," said Sister Paul. "So am I, and it seems to me that our anger is just enough. Be angry and sin not. I think we can apply that to ourselves." "Who is that woman?" Beatrice asked. She was certainly angry, as the nun had said, but she felt by no means sure that she could resist the temptation of sinning if it presented itself as the possibility of tearing Unorna to pieces. "She was once with us," the nun answered. "I knew her when she was a mere girl, and I loved her then, in spite of her strange ways. But she has changed. They call her a witch, and indeed I think it is the only name for her." "I do not believe in witches," said Beatrice, a little scornfully, "but whatever she is bad. I do not know what it is that she wanted me to do in the church, upon the altar there. It was something horrible. Thank God you came in time. What could it have been, I wonder?" Sister Paul shook her head sorrowfully, but said nothing. She knew no more than Beatrice of Unorna's intention, but she believed in the existence of a black art, full of sacrilegious practices, and credited Unorna vaguely with the worst designs which she could think of, though in her goodness she was not able to imagine anything much worse than the saying of a Pater Noster backwards in a consecrated place. But she preferred to say nothing, lest she should judge Unorna unjustly. After all, she did not know. What she had seemed bad enough and strange enough, but apart from the fact that Beatrice had been found upon the altar, where she certainly had no business to be, and that Unorna had acted like a guilty woman, there was little to lay hold of in way of fact. "My child," she said at last, "until we know more of the truth, and have better advice than we can give each other, let us not speak of it to any one of the sisters. In the morning I will tell all I have seen in confession, and then I shall get advice. Perhaps you should do the same. I know nothing of what happened before you left your room. Perhaps you have something to reproach yourself with. It is not for me to ask. Think it over." "I will tell you the whole truth," Beatrice answered, resting her elbow upon the polished shelf and supporting her head in her hand, while she looked earnestly into Sister Paul's faded eyes. "Think well, my daughter. I have no right to any confession from you. If there is anything— Sister Paul! You are a woman, and I must have a woman's help. I have learned something tonight which will change my whole life. No, do not be afraid. I have done nothing wrong. At least, I hope not. While my father lived, I submitted. I hoped, but I gave no sign. I did not even write, as I once might have done. I have often wished that I had. Was that wrong?" "But you have told me nothing, dear child. How can I answer you?" The nun was perplexed. "True. I will tell you. Sister Paul, I am 25 years old. I am a grown woman, and this is no mere girl's love story. 7 years ago, I was only 18 then, I was with my father, as I have been ever since. My mother had not been dead long then. Perhaps that is the reason why I seemed to be everything to my father. But they had not been happy together, and I had loved her best. We were travelling, no matter where, and then I met the man I have loved. He was not of our country, that is, of my father's. He was of the same people as my mother. Well, I loved him. How dearly you must guess, and try to understand. I could not tell you that. No one could. It began gradually, for he was often with us in those days. My father liked him for his wit, his learning, though he was young, for his strength and manliness, for 100 reasons which were nothing to me. I would have loved him had he been a cripple, poor, ignorant, despised, instead of being what he was, the grandest, noblest man God ever made. For I did not love him for his face, nor for his courtly ways, nor for such gifts as other men might have, but for himself and for his heart. Do you understand? For his goodness, said Sister Paul, nodding in approval. I understand. No, Beatrice answered, half impatiently, not for his goodness either. Many men are good, and so was he. He must have been, of course. No matter. I loved him. That is enough. He loved me too. And one day we were alone, in the broad spring sun, upon a terrace. There were lemon trees there. I can see the place. Then we told each other that we loved, but neither of us could find the words. They must be somewhere, the strong, beautiful words that could tell how we loved. We told each other, "Without your father's consent?" asked the nun, almost severely. Beatrice's eyes flashed. "Is a woman's heart a dog that must follow at heel?" she asked fiercely. "We loved. That was enough. My father had the power, but not the heart, to come between. We told him then, for we were not cowards. We told him boldly that it must be. He was a thoughtful man who spoke little. He said that we must part at once, before we loved each other better, and that we should soon forget. We looked at each other, the man I loved and I. We knew that we should love better yet, parted or together, though we could not tell how that could be. But we knew also that such love as there was between us was enough. My father gave no reasons, but I knew that he hated the name of my mother's nation. Of course we met again. I remember that I could cry in those days. My father had not learned to part us then. Perhaps he was not quite sure himself. At all events, the parting did not come so soon. We told him that we would wait, forever if it must be. He may have been touched, though little touched him at the best. Then, one day, suddenly and without warning, he took me away to another city. And what of him? I asked. He told me that there was an evil fever in the city, that it had seized him, the man I loved. He is free to follow us if he pleases, said my father, but he never came. Then followed a journey, and another, until I knew that my father was traveling to avoid him. When I saw that, I grew silent, and never spoke his name again. Farther and farther, longer and longer, to the ends of the earth. We saw many people, many asked for my hand. Sometimes I heard of him, from men who had seen him lately. I waited patiently, for I knew that he was on our track, and sometimes I felt that he was near. Beatrice paused. It is a strange story, said Sister Paul, who had rarely heard a tale of love. The strange thing is, Beatrice answered, that woman, what is her name? Unorna? She loves him, and she knows where he is. Unorna? Repeated the nun in bewilderment. Yes. She met me after Compline tonight. I could not but speak to her, and then I was deceived. I cannot tell whether she knew what I am to him, but she deceived me utterly. She told me a strange story of her own life. I was lonely. In all those years I had never spoken of what has filled me. I cannot tell how it was. I began to speak, and then I forgot that she was there, and told all. She made you tell her, by her secret arts, said Sister Paul in a low voice. No. I was lonely, and I believed that she was good, and I felt that I must speak. Then, I cannot think how I could have been so mad, but I thought that we should never meet again, and I showed her a likeness of him. She turned on me. I shall not forget her face. I heard her say that she knew him and loved him too. When I awoke, I was lying on the altar. That is all I know. Her evil arts, repeated the nun, shaking her head. Come, my dear child, let us see if all is in order there, upon the altar. If these things are to be known, they must be told in the right quarter. The sacristan must not see that anyone has been in the church. Sister Paul took up the lamp, but Beatrice laid a hand upon her arm. You must help me to find him, she said firmly. He is not far away. Her companion looked at her in astonishment. Help you to find him? She stammered. But I cannot. I do not know. I'm afraid it is not right. An affair of love. An affair of life, Sister Paul, and of death too, perhaps. This woman lives in Prague. She is rich and must be well known indeed, too well known, the witch they call her. Then there are those who know her. Tell me the name of one person only. It is impossible that you should not remember someone who is acquainted with her, who has talked with you of her, perhaps one of the ladies who have been here in retreat." The nun was silent for a moment, gathering her recollections. "There is one, at least, who knows her," she said at length. "A great lady here. It is said that she, too, meddles with forbidden practices, and that Unorna has often been with her, that together they have called up the spirits of the dead with strange rappings and writings. She knows her, I am sure, for I have talked with her, and she says it is all natural, and that there is a learned man with them sometimes, who explains how all such things may happen in the course of nature. A man, let me see. It is George, I think, but not as we call it, not Georgi nor Gigor, no. It sounds harder. Kirgi, no. Georg Arabian, exclaimed Beatrice. Is he here? You know him? Sister Paul looked almost suspiciously at the young girl. Indeed I do. He was with us in Egypt once. He showed us wonderful things among the tombs. A strange little man who knew everything, but very amusing. I do not know. But that is his name. He lives in Prague. How can I find him? I must see him at once. He will help me. The nun shook her head with disapproval. I should be sorry that you should talk with him, she said. I fear he is no better than Unorna, and perhaps worse. You need not fear, Beatrice answered, with a scornful smile. I am not in the least afraid. Only tell me how I am to find him. He lives here, you say. Is there no directory in the convent? I believe the portress keeps such a book, said Sister Paul, still shaking her head uneasily. But you must wait until the morning, my dear child, if you will do this thing. Of the two, I should say that you would do better to write to the lady. Come, we must be going. It is very late. She had taken the lamp again and was moving slowly towards the door. Beatrice had no choice but to submit. It was evident that nothing more could be done at present. The two women were back into the church, and going round the high altar began to examine everything carefully. The only trace of disorder they could discover was the fallen candlestick, so massive and strong that it was not even bent or injured. They climbed the short wooden steps, and uniting their strength, set it up again, carefully and in its place, restoring the thick candle to the socket. Though broken in the middle by the fall, the heavy wax supported itself easily enough. Then they got down again, and Sister Paul took away the steps. For a few moments both women knelt down before the altar. They left the church by the nuns' staircase, bolting the door behind them, and descended to the corridors and reached Beatrice's room. Unorna's door was open, as the nun had left it, and the yellow light streamed upon the pavement. She went in and extinguished the lamp, and then came back to Beatrice. Are you not afraid to be alone after what has happened? She asked. Afraid? Of what? No, indeed. Then she thanked her companion again and kissed Sister Paul's waxen cheek. Say a prayer, my daughter, and may all be well with you, now and ever, said the good sister as she went away through the darkness. She needed no light in the familiar way to her cell. Beatrice searched among her numerous belongings and at last brought out a writing case. Then she sat down to her table by the light of the lamp that had illuminated so many strange sights that night. She wrote the name of the convent clearly upon the paper, and then wrote a plain message in the fewest possible words. Something of her strong, devoted nature showed itself in her handwriting. Beatrice Varinger begs that Keyork Arabian will meet her in the parlor of the convent as soon after receiving this as possible. The matter is very important. She had reasons of her own for believing that Keyork had not forgotten her in the 5 years or more since they had been in Egypt together. Apart from the fact that his memory had always been surprisingly good, he had at that time professed the most unbounded admiration for her, and she remembered with a smile his quaint devotion, his fantastic courtesy, and his gnome-like attempts at grace. She folded the note, to wait for the address which she could not ascertain until the morning. She could do nothing more. It was nearly 2 o'clock, and there was evidently nothing to be done but to sleep. As she laid her head upon the pillow a few minutes later, she was amazed at her own calm. Strong natures, in great tests, often surprise themselves far more than they surprise others. Others see the results, always simpler in proportion as they are greater. But the actors themselves alone know how hard the great and simple can seem. Beatrice's calmness was not only of the outward kind at the present moment. She felt that she was alone in the world, and that she had taken her life into her own hands. Fate had lent her the clue of her happiness at last, and she would hold it firmly to the end. It would be time enough to open the floodgates. It would have been unlike her to dwell long upon the thought of Unorna, or to give way to any passionate outbreak of hatred. Why should Unorna not love him? The whole world loved him, and small wonder. She feared no rival. But he was near her now. Her heart leaped as she realized how very near he might well be, then sank again to its calm beating. He had been near her a score of times in the past, and yet they had not met. But she had not been free then as she was now. There was more hope than before, but she could not delude herself with any belief in a certainty. So thinking, and so saying to herself, she fell asleep, and slept soundly without dreaming, as most people do who are young and strong, and who are clear-headed and active when they are awake. It was late when she opened her eyes, and the broad cold light filled the room. She lost no time in thinking over the events of the night, for everything was fresh in her memory. Half-dressed, she wrapped about her a cloak that came down to her feet. Throwing a black veil over her hair, she went down to the portress's lodge. In 5 minutes she had found Keyork's address, and had dispatched one of the convent gardeners with the note. Then she leisurely returned to her room, and set about completing her toilet. She naturally supposed that an hour or two must elapse before she received an answer, certainly before Keyork appeared in person, a fact which showed that she had forgotten something of the man's characteristics. 20 minutes had scarcely passed, and she had not finished dressing when Sister Paul entered the room, evidently in a state of considerable anxiety. As has been seen, it chanced to be her turn to superintend the guests' quarters at that time, and the portress had of course informed her immediately of Keyork's coming, in order that she might tell Beatrice. "He is there," she said, as she came in. Beatrice was standing before the little mirror that hung upon the wall, trying, under no small difficulties, to arrange her hair. She turned her head quickly. "Who is there? Keyork Arabian?" Sister Paul nodded, glad that she was not obliged to pronounce the name that had for her such an unchristian sound. "Where is he? I did not think he could come so soon. Oh, Sister Paul, do help me with my hair. I cannot make it stay." "He is in the parlour downstairs," answered the nun, coming to her assistance. "Indeed, child, I do not see how I can help you." She touched the black coils ineffectually. "There, is that better?" she asked in a timid way. "I do not know how to do it." "No, no!" Beatrice exclaimed. "Hold that end, so. Now turn it that way. No, the other way. It is in the glass, so. Now keep it there while I put in a pin. No, no, in the same place, but the other way. Oh, Sister Paul, did you never do hair when you were a girl?" "That was so long ago," answered the nun meekly. "Let me try again." The result was passably satisfactory at last, and assuredly not wanting in the element of novelty. "Are you not afraid to go alone?" asked Sister Paul with evident preoccupation, as Beatrice put a few more touches to her toilet. But the young girl only laughed and made the more haste. Sister Paul walked with her to the head of the stairs, wishing that the rules would allow her to accompany Beatrice into the parlour. Then as the ladder went down, the nun stood at the top looking after her and audibly repeating prayers for her preservation. The convent parlour was a large, bare room, lighted by a high and grated window. Plain, straight, modern chairs were arranged against the wall at regular intervals. There was no table, but a square piece of green carpet lay upon the middle of the stone pavement. A richly ornamented glazed earthenware stove, in which a fire had just been lighted, occupied one corner, a remnant of former aesthetic taste and strangely out of place since the old carved furniture was gone. A crucifix of inferior workmanship and realistically painted hung opposite the door. The place was reserved for the use of ladies in retreat and was situated outside the constantly closed door which shut off the cloistered part of the convent from the small portion accessible to outsiders. Keyork Arabian was standing in the middle of the parlour, waiting for Beatrice. When she entered at last, he made 2 steps forward, bowing profoundly, and then smiled in a deferential manner. "My dear lady," he said, "I am here. I have lost no time. It so happened that I received your note just as I was leaving my carriage after a morning drive. I had no idea you were in Bohemia." "Thanks. It was good of you to come so soon." She sat down upon one of the stiff chairs and motioned to him to follow her example. "And your dear father, how is he?" inquired Keyork with suave politeness as he took a seat. "My father died a week ago," said Beatrice gravely. Keyork's face assumed all the expression of which it was capable. "I am deeply grieved," he said, moderating his huge voice to a soft and purring sub-bass. "He was an old and valued friend." There was a moment's silence. Keyork, who knew many things, was well aware that a silent feud, of which he also knew the cause, had existed between father and daughter when he had last been with them, and he rightly judged from his knowledge of their obstinate characters that it had lasted to the end. He thought, therefore, that his expression of sympathy had been sufficient and could pass muster. "I asked you to come," said Beatrice at last, "because I wanted your help in a matter of importance to myself. I understand that you know a person who calls herself Unorna, and who lives here." Keyork's bright blue eyes scrutinized her face. He wondered how much she knew. "Very well indeed," he answered, as though not at all surprised. "You know something of her life, then. I suppose you see her very often, do you not?" "Daily, I can almost say." "Have you any objection to answering one question about her?" "20 if you ask them, and if I know the answers," said Keyork, wondering what form the question would take, and preparing to meet a surprise with indifference. "But will you answer me truly?" "My dear lady, I pledge you my sacred word of honor," Keyork answered with immense gravity, meeting her eyes and laying his hand upon his heart. "Does she love that man, or not?" Beatrice asked, suddenly showing him the little miniature of the Wanderer, which she had taken from its case and had hitherto concealed in her hand. She watched every line on his face, for she knew something of him, and in reality put very little more faith in his word of honor than he did himself, which was not saying much. But she had counted upon surprising him, and she succeeded to a certain extent. His answer did not come as glibly as he could have wished, though his plan was soon formed. "Who is it? Ah, dear me, my old friend. We call him the Wanderer. Well, Unorna certainly knew him when he was here." "And he is gone?" "Indeed, I am not quite sure," said Keyork, regaining all his self-possession. "Of course I can find out for you, if you wish to know. But as regards to Unorna, I can tell you nothing. They were a good deal together at one time. I fancy he was consulting her. You have heard that she is a clairvoyante, I dare say." He made the last remark quite carelessly, as though he attached no importance to the fact. "Then you do not know whether she loves him?" Keyork indulged himself with a little discreet laughter, deep and musical. "Love is a very vague word," he said presently. "Is it?" Beatrice asked, with some coldness. "To me, at least," Keyork hastened to say, as though somewhat confused. "But, of course, I can know very little about it in myself, and nothing about it in others." Not knowing how matters might turn out, he was willing to leave Beatrice with a suspicion of the truth, while denying all knowledge of it. "You know him yourself, of course," Beatrice suggested. "I have known him for years. Oh yes, for him I can answer. He was not in the least in love." "I did not ask that question," said Beatrice rather haughtily. "I knew he was not." Of course, I beg your pardon." Keyork was learning more from her than she from him. It was true that she took no trouble to conceal her interest in the Wanderer and his doings. "Are you sure that he has left the city?" Beatrice asked. "No, I am not positive. I could not say with certainty." "When did you see him last?" "Within the week, I'm quite sure," Keyork answered with alacrity. "Do you know where he was staying?" "I have not the least idea," the little man replied, without the slightest hesitation. "We met at first by chance in the Teyn Kirche one afternoon. It was a Sunday, I remember, about a month ago." "A month ago. On a Sunday," Beatrice repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, I think it was New Year's Day too." "Strange," she said. "I was in the church that very morning, with my maid. I had been ill for several days. I remember how cold it was. Strange. The same day." "Yes," said Keyork, noting the words, but appearing to take no notice of them. "I was looking at Tycho Brahe's monuments. You know how it annoys me to forget anything. There was a word in the inscription which I could not recall. I turned round and saw him sitting just at the end of the pew nearest to the monument." The old red slab with a figure on it, by the last pillar? Beatrice asked eagerly. Exactly. I dare say you know the church very well. You remember that the pew runs very near to the monument so that there is hardly room to pass. I know, yes. She was thinking that it could hardly have been a mere accident which had led the wanderer to take the very seat she had occupied on the morning of that day. He must have seen her during the Mass, but she could not imagine how he could have missed her. They had been very near then. And now, a whole month had passed, and Keyork Arabian professed not to know whether the wanderer was still in the city or not. Then you wish to be informed of our friend's movements, as I understand, said Keyork, going back to the main point. Yes. What happened on that day? Beatrice asked, for she wished to hear more. Oh, on that day? Yes. Well, nothing happened worth mentioning. We talked a little, and went out of the church, and walked a little way together. I forget when we met next, but I have seen him at least a dozen times since then, I'm sure. Beatrice began to understand that Keyork had no intention of giving her any further information. She reflected that she had learned much in this interview. The wanderer had been, and perhaps still was, in Prague. Unorna loved him, and they had been frequently together. He had been in the Tain Krish on the same day she had last been there herself, and in all probability he had seen her, since he had chosen the very seat in which she had sat. Further, she gathered that Keyork had some interest in not speaking more frankly. She gave up the idea of examining him any further. He was a man not easily surprised, and it was only by means of a surprise that he could be induced to betray even by a passing expression what he meant to conceal. Her means of attack were exhausted for the present. She determined at least to repeat her request clearly before dismissing him, in the hope that it might suit his plans to fulfill it, but without the least trust in his sincerity. Will you be so kind as to make some inquiry, and let me know the result today? She asked. I will do everything to give you an early answer, said Keyork, and I shall be the more anxious to obtain one without delay in order that I might have the very great pleasure of visiting you again. There is much that I would like to ask you, if you would allow me. For old friends, as I trust I may say that we are, you must admit that we have exchanged very few, confidences this morning. May I come again today? It would be an immense privilege to talk of old times with you, of our friends in Egypt, and of our many journeys. For you have no doubt travelled much since then. Your dear father," he lowered his voice reverentially, "was a great traveller, as well as a very learned man. Ah, well, my dear lady, we must all make up our minds to undertake that great journey one of these days. But I pain you. I was very attached to your dear father. Command all my service. I will come again in the course of the day." With many sympathetic smiles, and half-comic inclinations of his short, broad body, the little man bowed himself out. End of chapter 25.
Chapter 26 of The Witch of Prague, A Fantastic Tale. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Witch of Prague, A Fantastic Tale by Frances Marion Crawford. Chapter 26. Unorna drew one deep breath when she first heard her name fall with a loving accent from the wanderer's lips. Surely the bitterness of despair was past, since she was loved and not called Beatrice. The sigh that came then was of relief already felt, the forerunner, as she fancied too, of a happiness no longer dimmed by shadows of fear and mists of rising remorse. Gazing into his eyes, she seemed to be watching, in their reflection, a magic change. She had been Beatrice to him, Unorna to herself, but now the transformation was at hand, now it was to come. For him she loved, and who loved her? She was Unorna, even to the name. In her own thoughts she had taken the dark woman's face. She had risked all upon the chances of one throw, and she had won. So long as he had called her by another's name, the bitterness had been as gall mingled in the wine of love. But now that too was gone. She felt that it was complete at last. Her golden head sank peacefully upon his shoulder in the morning light. "You have been long in coming, love," she said, only half consciously, "but you have come as I dreamed. It is perfect now. There is nothing wanting any more. It is all full, all real, all perfect," he answered softly. "And there is to be no more parting now, neither here nor afterwards, beloved." "Then this is afterwards. Heaven has nothing more to give. What is heaven? The meeting of those who love, as we have met. I have forgotten what it was to live before you came. For me there is nothing to remember between that day and this. That day when you fell ill, Unorna said, the loneliness, the fear for you. Unorna scarcely knew that it had not been she who had parted from him so long ago, yet she was playing a part, and in the semi-consciousness of her deep self-illusion it all seemed as real as a vision in a dream, so often dreamed that it has become part of the dreamer's life. Those who fall by slow degrees under the power of the all-destroying opium remember yesterday as being very far, very long past, and recall faint memories of last year as though a century had lived and perished since then, seeing confusedly in their own lives the lives of others, and other existences in their own, until identity is almost gone in the endless transmigration of their souls from the shadow in one dream tale to the wraith of themselves that dreams the next. So in that hour Unorna drifted through the changing scenes that a word had power to call up, scarce able and wholly unwilling to distinguish between her real and her imaginary self. What matter how? What matter where? The very questions which at first she had asked herself came now but faintly as out of an immeasurable distance, and always more faintly still. They died away in her ears, as when, after long waiting and false starts, and turnings back and anxious words exchanged, the great race is at last begun, the swift long limbs are gathered and stretched and strained and gathered again, the thunder of flying hoofs is in the air, and the rider, with low hands and head inclined and eyes bent forward, hears the last anxious word of parting counsel tremble and die in the rush of the wind behind. She had really loved him throughout all those years. She had really sought him and mourned for him and longed for a sight of his face. They had really parted and had really found each other but a short hour since. There was no Beatrice but Unorna, and no Unorna but Beatrice, for they were one and indivisible and interchangeable as the glance of a man's two eyes that look on one fair sight. Each sees alone the same, but seeing together the sight grows doubly fair. "And all the sadness, where is it now?" she asked, "and all the emptiness of that long time? It never was, my love. It was yesterday we met. We parted yesterday to meet to-day. Say it was yesterday. The little word can undo 7 years." "It seems like yesterday," he answered. "Indeed, I can almost think so now, for it was all night between. But not quite dark, as night is sometimes. It was a night full of stars. Each star was a thought of you, that burned softly and showed me where heaven was. And darkest night, they say, means coming morning. So when the stars went out, I knew the sun must rise." The words fell from her lips naturally. To her it seemed true that she had indeed waited long and hoped and thought of him. And it was not all false. Ever since her childhood she had been told to wait, for her love would come, and would come only once. And so it was true, and the dream grew sweeter, and the illusion of the enchantment more enchanting still. For it was an enchantment and a spell that bound them together there, among the flowers, the drooping palms, the graceful tropic plants, and the shadowy leaves. And still the day rose higher, but still the lamps burned on, fed by the silent, mysterious current that never tires, blending a real light with an unreal one, an emblem of Unorna's self, mixing and blending, too, with a self not hers. "And the sun is risen indeed," she added presently. "Am I the sun, dear?" he asked, foretasting the delight of listening to her simple answer. "You are the sun, beloved, and when you shine my eyes can see nothing else in heaven." "And what are you yourself? Beatrice? No, Unorna? Is that the name you chose? It is so hard to remember anything when I look at you." "Beatrice, Unorna, anything," came the answer, softly murmuring. "Anything, dear, any name, any face, any voice, if only I am I, and you are you, and we two love. Both, neither, anything. Do the blessed souls in paradise know their own names?" "You are right. What does it matter? Why should you need a name at all, since I have you with me always? It was well once. It served me when I prayed for you, and it served to tell me that my heart was gold while you were there, as the goldsmith's mark upon his jewel stamps the pure metal, that all men may know it." "You need no sign like that to show me what you are," said she, with a long glance. "Nor I to tell me you are in my heart," he answered. "It was a foolish speech. Would you have me wise now?" "If wisdom is love, yes. If not?" She laughed softly. "Then folly?" "Then folly, madness, anything, so that this last as last it must, or I shall die." "And why should it not last? Is there any reason in earth or heaven why we two should part? If there is, I will make that reason itself folly and madness and unreason. Dear, do not speak of this not lasting. Die, you say? Worse, far worse, as much as eternal death is worse than bodily dying. Last? Does any one know what forever means, if we do not? Die we must, in these dying bodies of ours, but part? No. Love has burned the cruel sense out of that word, and bleached its blackness white. We wounded the devil, parting with one kiss. We killed him with the next. This buries him. Ah, love, how sweet!" There was neither resistance nor the thought of resisting. Their lips met and were withdrawn, only that their eyes might drink again the draught the lips had tasted, long draughts of sweetness and liquid light and love unfathomable. And in the interval of speech, half false, the truth of what was all true welled up from the clear depths and overflowed the falseness, till it grew falser and more fleeting still, as a thing lying deep in a bright water casts up a distorted image on refracted rays. Glance and kiss, when two love, are as body and soul, supremely human and transcendently divine. The look alone, when the lips cannot meet, is but the disembodied spirit, beautiful even in its sorrow, sad, despairing, saying ever and yet sighing never, tasting and knowing all the bitterness of both. The kiss without the glance, the body without the soul, the mortal thing without the undying thought. Draw down the thick veil and hide the sight, lest devils sicken at it, and lest man should loathe himself for what man can be. Truth or untruth, their love was real, hers as much as his. She remembered only what her heart had been without it, what her goal might be, now that it had come. She guessed even then, but she would not ask. Was there never a martyr in old times, more human than the rest, who turned back, for love perhaps, if not for fear, and said that for love's sake life still was sweet, and brought a milk-white dove to Aphrodite's altar, or dropped a rose before Demeter's feet? There must have been, for man is man, and woman, woman. And if in the next month, or even the next year, or after many years, that youth or maid took heart to bear a Christian's death, was there then no forgiveness, no sign of holy cross upon the sandstone in the deep labyrinth of graves, no crown, no sainthood, and no reverent memory of his name or hers among those of men and women worthier, perhaps, but not more suffering? No one can kill self, no one can be altogether another, save in the passing passion of a moment's acting. I, in that syllable lies the whole history of each human life. In that history lives the individuality. In the clear and true conception of that individuality dwells such joint foreknowledge of the future as we can have, such vague solution as to us is possible of that vast equation in which all quantities are unknown save that alone, that I which we know as we can know nothing else. "Bury it," she said. "Bury that parting, the thing, the word, and the thought. Bury it with all others of its kind, with change and old age and stealing indifference and growing coldness and all that cankers love. Bury them all together in one wide deep grave, then build on it the house of what we are." "Change, indifference, I do not know those words," the Wanderer said. "Have they been in your dreams, love? They have never been in mine." He spoke tenderly, but with the faintest echo of sadness in his voice. The mere suggestion that such thoughts could have been near her was enough to pain him. She was silent, and again her head lay upon his shoulder. She found there still the rest and the peace. Knowing her own life, the immensity of his faith and trust in that other woman were made clear by the simple, heartfelt words. If she had been indeed Beatrice, would he have loved her so? If it had all been true, the parting, the 7 years' separation, the utter loneliness, the hopelessness, the despair, could she have been as true as he? In the stillness that followed, she asked herself the question which was so near, a greater and a deadlier one. But the answer came quickly. That at least she could have done. She could have been true to him, even to death. It must be so easy to be faithful when life was but one faith. In that chord at least no note rang false. "Change in love, indifference to you!" she cried all at once, hiding her lovely face in his breast, and twining her arms about his neck. "No, no! I never meant that such things could be. They are but empty words, words one hears spoken lightly by lips that never spoke the truth, by men and women who never had such truth to speak as you and I." "And as for old age," he said, dwelling upon her speech, "what is that to us? Let it come, since come it must. It is good to be young and fair and strong. But would not you or I give up all that for love's sake, each of us of our own free will, rather than lose the other's love?" "Indeed, indeed, I would," Unorna answered. "Then what of age? What is it after all? A few grey hairs, a wrinkle here and there, a slower step, perhaps a dimmer glance. That is all it is. The quiet, sunny channel between the sea of earthly joy and the ocean of heavenly happiness. The breeze of love still fills the sails, wafting us softly onward through the narrows, never failing, though it be softer and softer, till we glide out, scarce knowing it, upon the broader water, and are borne swiftly away from the lost land by the first breath of heaven." His words brought peace and the mirage of a far-off rest that soothed again the little half-born doubt. "Yes," she said, "it is better to think so. Then we need think of no other change." "There is no other possible," he answered, gently pressing the shoulder upon which his hand was resting. "We have not waited and believed and trusted and loved for 7 years, to wake at last, face to face as we are to day, and to find that we have trusted vainly and loved to shadows, I yours and you mine, to find at the great moment of all that we are not ourselves, the selves we knew, but others of like passions, but of less endurance. Have we, beloved? And if we could love and trust and believe without each other, each alone, is it not all the more sure that we shall be unchanging together? It must be so. The whole is greater than its parts. Two loves together are greater and stronger than each could be of itself. The strength of two strands close twined together is more than twice the strength of each." She said nothing. By merest chance he had said words that had waked the doubt again, so that it grew a little and took a firmer hold in her unwilling heart. To love a shadow, he had said, to wake and find self, not self at all. That was what might come, would come, must come, sooner or later, said the doubt. What matter where, or when, or how? The question came again, vaguely, faintly, as a mere memory, but confidently, as though knowing its own answer. Had she not rested in his arms, and felt his kisses, and heard his voice? What matter how, indeed? It matters greatly, said the growing doubt, rearing its head and finding speech at last. It matters greatly, it said, for love lies not alone in voice, and kiss, and gentle touch, but in things more enduring, which to endure must be sound and whole, and not cankered to the core by a living lie. Then came the old reckless reasoning again. Am I not I? Is he not he? Do I not love him with my whole strength? Does he not love this very self of mine, here as it is, my head upon his shoulder, my hand within his hand? And if he once loved another, have I not her place to have and hold, that I may be loved in her stead? Go, said the doubt, growing black and strong, go, for you are nothing to him but a figure in his dream, disguised in the lines of one he really loved and loves. Go quickly, before it is too late, before that real Beatrice comes and wakes him and drives you out of the kingdom you usurp. But she knew it was only a doubt, and had it been the truth, and had Beatrice's foot been on the threshold, she would not have been driven away by fear. But the fight had begun. Speak to me, dear, she said. I must hear your voice. It makes me know that it is all real. How the minutes fly, he exclaimed, smoothing her hair with his hand. It seems to me that I was but just speaking when you spoke. It seems so long, she checked herself, wondering whether an hour had passed or but a second. Though love be swifter than the fleeting hours, doubt can outrun a lifetime in one beating of the heart. Then how divinely long it all may seem, he answered. But can we not begin to think and to make plans for tomorrow and the next day and for the years before us? That will make more time for us, for with the present we shall have the future too. No, that is foolish again. And yet it is so hard to say which I would have. Shall the moment linger because it is so sweet, or shall it be gone quickly because the next is to be sweeter still? Love, where is your father? Unorna started. The question was suggested, perhaps, by his inclination to speak of what was to be done, but it fell suddenly upon her ears as a peal of thunder when the sky has no clouds. Must she lie now, or break the spell? One word, at least, she could yet speak with truth. Dead. Dead, the wanderer repeated thoughtfully, and with a faint surprise. Is it long ago, beloved? He asked presently in a subdued tone, as though fearing to wake some painful memory. Yes, she answered. The great doubt was taking her heart in its strong hands now, and tearing it and twisting it. And whose house is this in which I have found you, darling? Was it his? It is mine, Unorna said. How long would he ask questions to which she could find true answers? What question would come next? There were so many he might ask, and few to which she could reply so truthfully, even in that narrow sense of truth which found its only meaning in a whim of chance. But for a moment he asked nothing more. Not mine, she said. It is yours. You cannot take me and yet call anything mine. Ours, then. What does it matter? So he died long ago, poor man, and yet it seems but a little while since some one told me. But that was a mistake, of course. He did not know. How many years may it be, dear one? I see you still wear mourning for him. No, that was but a fancy to day. He died more than 2 years ago. She bent her head. It was but a poor attempt at truth, a miserable lying truth to deceive herself with, but it seemed better than to lie the whole truth outright, and say that her father, Beatrice's father, had been dead but just a week. The blood burned in her face. Brave natures, good and bad alike, hate falsehood, not for its wickedness, perhaps, but for its cowardice. She could do things as bad, far worse. She could lay her hand upon the forehead of a sleeping man and inspire in him a deep, unchangeable belief in something utterly untrue. But now, as it was, she was ashamed and hid her face. It is strange, he said, how little men know of each other's lives or deaths. They told me he was alive last year, but it has hurt you to speak of it. Forgive me, dear. It was thoughtless of me. He tried to lift her head, but she held it obstinately down. Have I pained you, Beatrice? He asked, forgetting to call her by the other name that was so new to him. No, oh no, she exclaimed without looking up. "What is it, then?" "Nothing. It is nothing. No, I will not look at you. I am ashamed." That at least was true. Ashamed, dear heart? Of what? He had seen her face in spite of herself. "Lie or lose all," said a voice within. "Ashamed of being glad that I am free," she stammered, struggling on the very verge of the precipice. "You may be glad of that, and yet be very sorry he is dead," the Wanderer said, stroking her hair. It was true, and seemed quite simple. She wondered that she had not thought of that. Yet she felt that the man she loved, in all his nobility and honesty, was playing the tempter to her, though he could not know it. Deeper and deeper she sank, yet ever more conscious that she was sinking. Before him she felt no longer as loving woman to loving man. She was beginning to feel as a guilty prisoner before his judge. He thought to turn the subject to a lighter strain. By chance he glanced at his own hand. "Do you know this ring?" he asked, holding it before her with a smile. "Indeed I know it," she answered, trembling again. "You gave it to me, love, do you remember? And I gave you a likeness of myself, because you asked for it, though I would rather have given you something better. Have you it still?" She was silent. Something was rising in her throat. Then she choked it down. "I had it in my hand last night," she said in a breaking voice. "True," once more. "What is it, darling? Are you crying? This is no day for tears." "I little thought that I should have yourself to day," she tried to say. Then the tears came, tears of shame, big, hot, slow. They fell upon his hands. She was weeping for joy, he thought. What else could any man think in such a case? He drew her to him and pressed her cheek with his hand as her head nestled on his shoulder. "When you put this ring on my finger, dear, so long ago " She sobbed aloud. "No, darling, no, dear heart," he said, comforting her. "You must not cry. That long ago is over now, and gone for ever. Do you remember that day, sweetheart, in the broad spring sun upon the terrace among the lemon trees? No, dear, your tears hurt me always, even when they are shed in happiness. No, dear, no. Rest there. Let me dry your dear eyes. So, and so. Again, for ever, if you will. While you have tears, I have kisses to dry them. It was so then, on that very day. I can remember. I can see it all. And you have not changed, love, in all those years, more than a blossom changes in 1 hour of a summer's day. You took this ring and put it on my finger. Do you remember what I said? I know the very words. I promised you it needed no promise either that it should never leave its place until you took it back. And you, how well I remember your face, you said that you would take it from my hand some day, when all was well, when you should be free to give me another in its stead, and to take one in return. I have kept my word, beloved. Keep yours. I have brought you back the ring. Take it, sweetheart. It is heavy with the burden of lonely years. Take it and give me that other which I claim." She did not speak, for she was fighting down the choking sobs, struggling to keep back the burning drops that scalded her cheeks, striving to gather strength for the weight of a greater shame. "Lie or lose all," the voice said. Very slowly she raised her head. She knew that his hand was close to hers, held there that she might fulfil Beatrice's promise. Was she not free? Could she not give him what he asked, no matter how? She tried to say it to herself, and could not. She felt his breath upon her hair. He was waiting. If she did not act soon, or speak, he would wonder what held her back. Wonder. Suspicion next, and then She put out her hand to touch his fingers, half blinded, groping as though she could not see. He made it easy for her. He fancied she was trembling as she was weeping with the joy of it all. She felt the ring, though she dared not look at it. She drew it a little, and felt that it would come off easily. She felt the fingers she loved so well, straight, strong, and nervous, and she touched them lovingly. The ring was not tight. It would pass easily over the joint. That alone kept it in its place. "Take it, beloved," he said. "It has waited long enough." He was beginning to wonder at her hesitation, as she knew he would. After wonder would come suspicion, and then Very slowly, it was just upon the joint of his finger now. Should she do it? What would happen? He would have broken his vow, unwittingly. How quickly and gladly Beatrice would have taken it! What would she say if they lived and met? Why should they not meet? Would the spell endure that shock? Who would Beatrice be then? The woman who had given him this ring, or another, whom he would no longer know? But she must be quick. He was waiting, and Beatrice would not have made him wait. Her hand was like stone, numb, motionless, immovable, as though some unseen being had taken it in an iron grasp and held it there, in mid-air, just touching his. Yes, no, yes. She could not move. A hand was clasped upon her wrist, a hand smaller than his, but strong as fate, fixed in its grip as an iron vice. Unorna felt a cold breath that was not his upon her forehead, and she felt as though her heavy hair were rising of itself upon her head. She knew that horror, for she had been overtaken by it once before. She was not afraid, but she knew what it was. There was a shadow, too, and a dark woman, tall, queenly, with deep flashing eyes, was standing beside her. She knew before she looked. She looked, and it was there. Her own face was whiter than that other woman's. "Have you come already?" she asked of the shadow, in a low, despairing tone. "Beatrice, what has happened?" cried the Wanderer. To him she seemed to be speaking to the empty air, and her white face startled him. "Yes," she said, staring still, in the same hopeless voice. "It is Beatrice. She has come for you." "Beatrice, beloved! Do not speak like that, for God's sake! What do you see? There is nothing there." "Beatrice is there. I am Unorna." "Unorna, Beatrice, have we not said it should be all the same? Sweetheart, look at me. Rest here. Shut those dear eyes of yours. It is gone now, whatever it was. You are tired, dear. You must rest." Her eyes closed and her head sank. It was gone, as he said, and she knew what it had been, a mere vision called up by her own over-tortured brain. Keyork Arabian had a name for it. "Frightened by your own nerves," laughed the voice, "when, if you had not been a coward, you might have faced it down and lied again, and all would have been well. But you shall have another chance, and lying is very easy, even when the nerves are overwrought. You will do better the next time." The voice was like Keyork Arabian's, unstrung, almost forgetting all. She wondered vaguely at the sound, for it was a real sound and a real voice to her. Was her soul his, indeed, and was he drawing it on slowly, surely to the end? Had he been behind her last night? Had he left an hour's liberty only to come back again and take at last what was his? "There is time yet. You have not lost him, for he thinks you mad." The voice spoke once more. And at the same moment the strong dear arms were again around her. Again her head was on that restful shoulder of his. Again her pale face was turned up to his, and kisses were raining on her tired eyes, while broken words of love and tenderness made music through the tempest. Again the vast temptation rose. How could he ever know? Who was to undeceive him, if he was not yet undeceived? Who should ever make him understand the truth so long as the spell lasted? Why not then take what was given her? And when the end came, if it came, then tell all boldly. Even then he would not understand. Had he understood last night, when she had confessed all that she had done before? He had not believed one word of it, except that she loved him. Could she make him believe it now, when he was clasping her so fiercely to his breast, half mad with love for her himself? So easy, too. She had but to forget that passing vision, to put her arms about his neck, to give kiss for kiss, and loving word for loving word. Not even that. She had but to lie there, passive, silent, if she could not speak, and it would be still the same. No power on earth could undo what she had done, unless she willed it. Neither man nor woman could make his clasping hands let go of her and give her up. "Be still and wait," whispered the voice. "You have lost nothing yet." But Unorna would not. She had spoken and acted her last lie. It was over. Chapter 26. Chapter 27 of The Witch of Prague, a Fantastic Tale. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Witch of Prague, a Fantastic Tale by Frances Marion Crawford. Chapter 27. Unorna struggled for a moment. The Wanderer did not understand, but loosed his arms so that she was free. She rose to her feet and stood before him. "You have dreamed all this," she said. "I am not Beatrice." "Dreamed? Not Beatrice?" she heard him cry in his bewilderment. "Something more," he said, but she could not catch the words. She was already gone, through the labyrinth of the many plants, to the door through which 12 hours earlier she had fled from Israel Kafka. She ran the faster as she left him behind. She passed the entrance and the passage and the vestibule beyond, not thinking whither she was going, or not caring. She found herself in that large, well-lighted room in which the ancient sleeper lay alone. Perhaps her instinct led her there, as to a retreat safer even than her own chamber. She knew that if she would, there was something there which she could use. She sank into a chair and covered her face, trembling from head to foot. For many minutes after that she could neither see nor hear. She would hardly have felt a wound or a blow, and yet she knew that she meant to end her life, since all that made it life was ended. After a time her hands fell in a despairing gesture upon her knees, and she stared about the room. Her eyes rested on the sleeper, then upon his couch, lying as a prophet in state, the massive head raised upon a silken pillow, the vast limbs just outlined beneath the snow-white robe, the hoary beard flowing down over the great breast that slowly rose and fell. To her there was a dreadful irony in that useless life prolonged in sleep beyond the limits of human age. Yet she had thought it worth the labour and care and endless watchfulness it had cost 4 years. And now her own, strong, young, and fresh, seemed not only useless but fit only to be cut off and cast away as an existence that offended God and man, and most of all herself. But if she died then, there in that secret chamber where she and her companion had sought the secret of life for years, if she died now, how would all end? Was it an expiation or a flight? Would one short moment of half-conscious suffering pay half her debt? She stared at the old man's face with wide, despairing eyes. Many a time, unknown to Keyork and once to his knowledge, she had roused the sleeper to speak, and on the whole he had spoken truly, wisely, and well. She lacked neither the less courage to die, nor the greater to live. She longed but to hear one honest word, not of hope, but of encouragement, but one word in contrast to those hideous whispered promptings that had come to her in Keyork Arabian's voice. How could she trust herself alone? Her evil deeds were many, so many that although she had turned at last against them, she could not tell where to strike. "If you would only tell me," she cried, leaning over the unconscious head. "If you would only help me! You are so old that you must be wise. And if so very wise, then you are good. Wake but this once, and tell me what is right." The deep eyes opened and looked up to hers. The great limbs stirred, the bony hands unclasped. There was something awe-inspiring in the ancient strength, renewed and filled with a new life. "Who calls me?" asked the clear, deep voice. "I, Unorna. What do you ask of me?" He had risen from his couch and stood before her, towering far above her head. Even the Wanderer would have seemed but of common stature beside this man of other years, of a forgotten generation, who now stood erect and filled with a mysterious youth. "Tell me what I should do. Tell me what you have done." Then in one great confession, with bowed head and folded hands, she poured out the story of her life. "And I am lost," she cried at last. "One holds my soul and one my heart. May not my body die? Oh, say that it is right, that I may die." "Die? Die, when you may yet undo?" "Undo? Undo and do. Undo the wrong and do the right." "I cannot. The wrong is past undoing, and I am past doing right." "Do not blaspheme. Go. Do it." "What?" "Call her. That other woman, Beatrice. Bring her to him, and him to her." "And see them meet?" She covered her face with her hands, and one short moan escaped her lips. "May I not die?" she cried despairingly. "May I not die for him, for her, for both? Would that not be enough? Would they not meet? Would they not then be free?" "Do you love him still?" "With all my broken heart." "Then do not leave his happiness to chance alone, but go at once. There is one little act of heaven's work still in your power. Make it all yours." His great hands rested on her shoulders, and his eyes looked down to hers. "Is it so bitter to do right?" he asked. "It is very bitter," she answered. Very slowly she turned, and as she moved he went beside her, gently urging her and seeming to support her. Slowly through vestibule and passage they went on, and entered together the great hall of the flowers. The Wanderer was there alone. He uttered a short cry and sprang to meet her, but stepped back in awe of the great white-robed figure that towered by her side. "Beatrice!" he cried as they passed. "I am not Beatrice," she answered, her downcast eyes not raised to look at him, moving still forward under the gentle guidance of the giant's hand. "Not Beatrice? No, you are not she? You are Unorna? Have I dreamed all this?" She had passed him now, and still she would not turn her head, but her voice came back to him as she walked on. "You have dreamed what will very soon be true," she said. "Wait here, and Beatrice will soon be with you." "I know that I am mad," the Wanderer cried, making one step to follow her, then stopping short. Unorna was already at the door. The ancient sleeper laid one hand upon her head. "You will do it now?" he said. "I will do it to the end," she answered. "Thank God that I have made you live to tell me how." So she went out alone to undo what she had done so evilly well. The old man turned and went towards the Wanderer, who stood still in the middle of the hall, confused, not knowing whether he had dreamed or was really mad. "What man are you?" he asked, as the white-robed figure approached. "A man as you are, for I was once young; not as you are, for I am very old; and yet like you, for I am young again." "You speak in riddles. What are you doing here, and where have you sent Unorna?" "When I was old, in that long time between, she took me in, and I have slept beneath her roof these many years. She came to me to day. She told me all her story and all yours, waking me from my sleep and asking me what she should do. And she has gone to do that thing of which I told her. Wait, and you will see. She loves you well." "And you would help her to get my love, as she had tried to get it before?" the Wanderer asked, with rising anger. "What am I to you, or you to me, that you would meddle in my life?" "You to me? Nothing. A man." "Therefore an enemy. And you would help Unorna? Let me go. This home is cursed. I will not stay in it." The hoary giant took his arm, and the Wanderer started at the weight and strength of the touch. "You shall bless this house before you leave it. In this place, here where you stand, you shall find the happiness you have sought through all the years." "In Unorna?" The question was asked scornfully. "By Unorna. I do not believe you. You are mad, as I am. Would you play the prophet?" The door opened in the distance, and from behind the screen of plants Keyork Arabian came forward into the hall, his small eyes bright, his ivory face set and expressionless, his long beard waving in the swing of his walk. The Wanderer saw him first, and called to him. "Keyork, come here," he said. "Who is this man?" For a moment Keyork seemed speechless with amazement, but it was anger that choked his words. Then he came on quickly. "Who waked him?" he cried in fury. "What is this? Why is he here?" "Unorna waked me," answered the ancient sleeper very calmly. "Unorna? Again? The curse of the three black angels on her! Mad again! Sleep, go back. It is not ready yet, and you will die, and I shall lose it all, all, all. Oh, she shall pay for this with her soul in hell." He threw himself upon the giant in an insane frenzy, clasping his arms round the huge limbs and trying to force him backwards. "Go, go!" he cried frantically. "It may not be too late. You may yet sleep and live. Oh, my experiment, my great experiment, all lost!" "What is this madness?" asked the Wanderer. "You cannot carry him, and he will not go. Let him alone." "Madness!" yelled Keyork, turning on him. "You are the madman, you the fool, who cannot understand. Help me to move him. You are strong and young. Together we can take him back. He may yet sleep and live. He must and shall. I say it. Lay your hands on him. You will not help me? Then I will curse you till you do." "Poor Keyork!" exclaimed the Wanderer, half pitying him. "Your big thoughts have cracked your little brain at last." "Poor Keyork! You call me poor Keyork, you boy, you puppet, you ball that we have bandied to and fro, half sleeping, half awake. It drives me mad to see you standing there scoffing instead of helping me." "You are past my help, I fear." "Will you not move? Are you dead already, standing on your feet and staring at me?" Again Keyork threw himself upon the huge old man, and stamped and struggled, and tried to move him backwards. He might as well have spent his strength against a rock. Breathless, but furious still, he desisted at last, too much beside himself to see that he whose sudden death he feared was stronger than he, because the great experiment had succeeded, far beyond all hope. "Unorna has done this!" he cried, beating his forehead in impotent rage. "Unorna has ruined me, and all and everything. So she has paid me for my help. Trust a woman when she loves. Trust angels to curse God, or hell to save a sinner. But she shall pay too. I have her still. Why do you stare at me? Wait, fool, you shall be happy now. What are you to me, that I should even hate you? You shall have what you want. I will bring you the woman you love, the Beatrice you have seen in dreams. And then Unorna's heart will break, and she will die, and her soul." Keyork broke into a peal of laughter, deep, rolling, diabolical in its despairing, frantic mirth. He was still laughing as he reached the door. "Her soul! Her soul!" they heard him cry between one burst and another as he went out, and from the echoing vestibule and from the staircase beyond, the great laughter rolled back to them when they were left alone. "What is it all? I cannot understand," the Wanderer said, looking up to the grand, calm face. "It is not always given to evil to do good, even for evil's sake," said the old man. "The thing that he would is done already. The wound that he would make is already bleeding. The heart he is gone to break is broken. The soul that he would torture is beyond all his torments." "Is Unorna dead?" the Wanderer asked, turning, he knew now why, with a sort of reverence, to his companion. "She is not dead." Unorna waited in the parlour of the convent. Then Beatrice came in and stood before her. Neither feared the other, and each looked into the other's eyes. "I have come to undo what I have done," Unorna said, not waiting for the cold inquiry which she knew would come if she were silent. "That will be hard indeed," Beatrice answered. "Yes, it is very hard. Make it still harder, if you can. I could still do it." "And do you think I will believe you, or trust you?" asked the dark woman. "I know that you will when you know how I have loved him." "Have you come here to tell me of your love?" "Yes." "And when I have told you, you will forgive me?" "I am no saint," said Beatrice coldly. "I do not find forgiveness in such abundance as you need." "You will find it for me. You are not bad, as I am, but you can understand what I have done, nevertheless, for you know what you yourself would do for the sake of him we love. No, do not be angry with me yet. I love him, and I tell you so, that you may understand. At that price I would rather not have the understanding. I do not care to hear you say it. It is not good to hear. Yet if I did not love him as I do, I should not be here of my own free will to take you to him. I came for that." "I do not believe you," Beatrice answered in tones like ice. "And yet you will, and very soon. Whether you forgive or not, that is another matter. I cannot ask it. God knows how much easier it would have been to die than to come here. But if I were dead, you might never have found him, nor he you, though you are so very near together. Do you think it is easier for me to come to you, whom he loves, than it is for you to hear me say I love him, when I come to give him to you? If you had found it all, not as it is, but otherwise, if you had found that in these years he had known me and loved me, as he once loved you, if he turned from you coldly and bid you forget him because he would be happy with me, and because he had utterly forgotten you, would it be easy for you to give him up?" "He loved me then. He loves me still," Beatrice said. "It is another case." "A much more bitter case. Even then you would have the memory of his love, which I can never have, in true reality, though I have much to remember, in his dreams of you." Beatrice started a little, and her brow grew dark and angry. "Then you have tried to get what was not yours by your bad powers?" she cried. "And you have made him sleep and dream?" "What?" "Of you. And he talked of love?" "Of love for you." "To you?" "To me. And dreamed that you were I." "That too?" "That I was you." "Is there more to tell?" Beatrice asked, growing white. "He kissed you in that dream of his? Do not tell me he did that. No, tell me all." "He kissed the thing he saw, believing the lips yours." "More, more. Is it not done yet? Can you sting again? What else?" "Nothing, save that last night I tried to kill you, body and soul." "And why did you not kill me?" "Because you woke. Then the nun saved you. If she had not come, you would have slept again, and slept for ever, and I would have let his dreams last, and made it last for him. I should have been the only Beatrice. You have done all this, and you ask me to forgive you." "I ask nothing. If you will not go to him, I will bring him to you." Beatrice turned away and walked across the room. "Loved her," she said aloud, "and talked to her of love, and kissed. She stopped suddenly. Then she came back again with swift steps and grasped Unorna's arm fiercely. "Tell me more still. This dream has lasted long. You are man and wife." "We might have been. He would still have thought me you for months and years. He would have had me take from his finger that ring you put there. I tried. I tell you the whole truth, but I could not. I saw you there beside me, and you held my hand. I broke away and left him." "Left him of your free will?" "I could not lie again. It was too much. He would have broken a promise if I had stayed. I love him, so I left him." "Is all this true?" "Every word." "Swear it to me." "How can I?" "By what shall I swear to you? Heaven itself would laugh at any oath of mine. With my life I will answer for every word. With my soul, no, it is not mine to answer with. Will you have my life? My last breath shall tell you that I tell the truth. The dying do not lie." "You tell me that you love that man. You tell me that you made him think in dreams that he loved you. You tell me that you might be man and wife, and you ask me to believe that you turned back from such happiness as would make an angel sin. If you had done this but it is not possible. No woman could. His words in your ear, and yet turn back. His lips on yours and leave him. Who could do that?" "One who loves him." "What made you do it?" "Love." "No, fear. Nothing else." "Fear? And what have I to fear? My body is beyond the fear of death, as my soul is beyond the hope of life. If it were to be done again, I should be weak. I know I should, if you could know half of what the doing cost. But let that alone. I did it, and he is waiting for you. Will you come?" "If I only knew it to be true." "How hard you make it! Yet it was hard enough." Beatrice touched her arm more gently than before, and gazed into her eyes. "If I could believe it all, I would not make it hard. I would forgive you, and you would deserve better than that, better than anything that is mine to give." "I deserve nothing and ask nothing. If you will come, you will see, and seeing, you will believe. And if you then forgive, well, then you will have done far more than I could do." "I would forgive you freely." "Are you afraid to go with me?" "No, I am afraid of something worse. You have put something here, a hope." "A hope? Then you believe?" "There is no hope without a little belief in it. Will you come?" "To him?" "To him." "It can but be untrue," said Beatrice, still hesitating. "I can but go." "What of him?" she asked suddenly. "If he were living, would you take me to him? Could you?" She turned very pale, and her eyes stared madly at Unorna. "If he were dead," Unorna answered, "I should not be here." Something in her tone and look moved Beatrice's heart at last. "I will go with you," she said, "and if I find him, and if all is well with him, then God in heaven repay you, for you have been braver than the bravest I ever knew." "Can love save a soul as well as lose it?" Unorna asked. Then they went away together. They were scarcely out of sight of the convent gate when another carriage drove up. Almost before it had stopped, the door opened, and Keyork Arabian's short, heavy form emerged and descended hastily to the pavement. He rang the bell furiously, and the old portress set the gate ajar and looked out cautiously, fearing that the noisy peal meant trouble or disturbance. "The Lady Beatrice Varanger. I must see her instantly," cried the little man in terrible excitement. "She is gone out," the portress replied. "Gone out? Where? Alone?" "With a lady who was here last night, a lady with unlike eyes." "Where? Where are they gone?" asked Keyork, hardly able to find breath. "The lady bade the coachman drive her home, but where she lives " "Home? To Unorna's home? It is not true. I see it in your eyes. Witch! Hag! Let me in! Let me in, I say! May vampires get your body and the three black angels cast lots upon your soul!" In the storm of curses that followed, the convent door was violently shut in his face. Within, the portress stood shaking with fear, crossing herself again and again, and verily believing that the devil himself had tried to force an entrance into the sacred place. In fearful anger, Keyork drew back. He hesitated one moment, and then regained his carriage. "To Unorna's house!" he shouted as he shut the door with a crash. "This is my house, and he is here," Unorna said, as Beatrice passed before her under the deep arch of the entrance. Then she led the way up the broad staircase, and through the small outer hall to the door of the great conservatory. "You will find him there," she said. "Go on alone." But Beatrice took her hand to draw her in. "Must I see it all?" Unorna asked hopelessly. Then from among the plants and trees a great white-robed figure came out and stood between them. Joining their hands, he gently pushed them forward to the middle of the hall, where the Wanderer stood alone. "It is done!" Unorna cried as her heart broke. She saw the scene she had acted so short a time before. She heard the passionate cry, the rain of kisses, the tempest of tears. The expiation was complete. Not a sight, not a sound was spared her. The strong arms of the ancient sleeper held her upright on her feet. She could not fall, she could not close her eyes, she could not stop her ears. No merciful stupor overcame her. "Is it so bitter to do right?" the old man asked, bending low and speaking softly. "It is the bitterness of death," she said. "It is well done," he answered. Then came a noise of hurried steps and a loud, deep voice calling, "Unorna! Unorna!" Keyork Arabian was there. He glanced at Beatrice and the Wanderer, locked in each other's arms, then turned to Unorna and looked into her face. "It has killed her," he said. "Who did it?" His low-spoken words echoed like angry thunder. "Give her to me," he said again. "She is mine, body and soul." But the great strong arms were around her and would not let her go. "Save me!" she cried in failing tones. "Save me from him!" "You have saved yourself," said the solemn voice of the old man. "Saved?" Keyork laughed. "From me?" He laid his hand upon her arm. Then his face changed again, and his laughter died dismally away, and he hung back. "Can you forgive her?" asked the other voice. The Wanderer stood close to them now, drawing Beatrice to his side. The question was for them. "Can you forgive me?" asked Unorna faintly, turning her eyes towards them. "As we hope to find forgiveness and trust in a life to come," they answered. There was a low sound in the air, unearthly, muffled, desperate, as of a strong being groaning in awful agony. When they looked, they saw that Keyork Arabian was gone. The dawn of a coming day rose in Unorna's face as she sank back. "It is over," she sighed, as her eyes closed. Her question was answered. Her love had saved her. End of chapter 27. End of The Witch of Prague, a Fantastic Tale by Frances Marion Crawford.